Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of Hawk Blogger Mornings. I am Brian Nemhauser. You can find me on Twitter and Instagram at Hawk Blogger. And I'm looking forward to having this conversation with my buddy Jeff Simmons at Real Jeff Simmons on Twitter. And yes, I still call it Twitter because I think X is the stupidest name, and I have no idea. It's like HBO rebranding as Max, like one of the stupidest rebrands I've ever seen. Like HBO had a sterling brand, and Twitter was a cool brand. I mean, it had problems, but you had the bird and the blue, and I liked everything about that kind of brand. And now X, I mean, talk about the most boring brand. I don't know. Anyway, I digress. Jeff, welcome. How you doing, my friend? How's your weekend starting so far?
It's funny you just said that. Like I was literally just like get on the show. I found it funny that to get on X, you still have to type in twitter.com.
I think, yeah. I
I'm
think
like,
they've started doing URL redirects, but
it's just
I see x.com now, but yeah, Twitter, it will forever be Twitter to me until someone pries it out of my cold dead voice, I guess.
yeah.
Um yeah, so do you have anything planned for the weekend?
It's a beautiful weekend in Toronto. I usually are complaining on here about the weather. So we're actually going to a wedding tomorrow night for an old roommate of mine in downtown Toronto. So that's tomorrow night. And then the rest of the weekend, just try to spend some time outside. And it's early enough in the day where I still have the rest of the day to get out there. But yeah, man, I'm pumped up to have some stuff to talk about for football because, man, I said it on Wednesday, like, this is a tough period for me. This 6 weeks without content is rough. I don't know what I'm going to
It
do.
it is. I mean, normally, the day after a mini camp practice where there's press conferences, I am just plowing through every one of the press conferences and playing highlights, and I'm like, there's no need to rush this. I got 6 weeks. I can go through Devin Witherspoon's press conference one day. I can go through Byron Murphy was on with I think it was Wyman and Bob. I haven't listened to that one yet. There's so much sound. JSN, I still haven't listened to all that. So yeah, we're gonna stretch this out a little bit, and I've even been doing some pre-recorded shows for when I'm on vacation. And yesterday I went through every one of Boye Mafe's sacks from last year. That was kind of fun. So went through every one of Gino's game-winning drives, kind of going through some look backs, and those will be coming out next week. While I am hopefully not careening an RV off a cliff somewhere on our vacation. But you golfed yesterday, is that right?
I did. I did.
How'd you do?
My first two holes were awful. It looked
Yeah.
like I'd never used the driver before. And then the last 15 or so, I figured it out. So I had a pretty good round in the last 15 holes. But the first two holes, I was like, I might not play golf ever again.
What does a good round look like for Jeff Simmons? Is that like in the 90s, in the 80s?
Probably high 80s.
That's a good round, dude.
Yeah,
Yeah.
my short game is just not good though. Like,
Yeah.
if you watch I can drive the ball pretty good. My iron play is really good, but in like 50 yards in, like I look like a complete hack. My putting is not good. My chipping is not good. I like rely on the bump and run way too much. But like when I hit my irons, like I can hit my pitching wedge like unusually far and like accurate. Like I can hit a pitching wedge 150 yards. But my driver is not reflective of that. Like it makes no sense. So my game is like weird, and like some people watch me like I don't understand it. But when I'm on, like my ball striking is really good.
Well, I haven't golfed now for probably almost 6 months, and I have no idea what would happen if I teed it up right now. But I do want to get out there at some point this summer and just see what's going on with my swing. But glad to hear you had a good round. One of the things that I'm sitting here scrolling through my timeline looking at stuff. There's some funny things that came out yesterday. We'll talk about the Sean McVay and Rams thing in a second. Did you see Did you see the post of Byron Murphy being Asian in the new version of Madden?
I saw that.
This is so funny. Here, I'm going to share my screen because this is too funny, man. Cracks me up. All right, here we go. Yeah. Check out Byron Murphy in this. I
Oh,
think
that
that is
Heinz
the
Ward one.
funniest thing. And I think like Mina Kimes, she was like sweet. I think she was enjoying that. It was pretty funny. I mean, and Mike Jarrell tweeted like, "That's actually pretty funny, man." I got a kick out of that, man. That was so funny. But also really funny was this story, and I think you might have been the first one that clued me in on it. You want to tell people about this thing that came out about the Rams? I'll read some of it, but what's the basic premise of the story?
So if you've ever seen Roku TV, or they are free Roku TV, it's an app on your smart TVs. They did a special with 3 teams that came out. I think it was yesterday. And they spent time with the Bears. They spent time with the Rams inside the draft room. And it's not like the team draft content that they edit a bunch of stuff out and they only show them. You literally saw their reactions, like other picks. And the Rams stuff was the best stuff. And a lot of it started to circulate on the internet. But this was not like an inside the John Boyle. This was like a third party kind of going into the Rams draft room. It's almost like a Hard Knocks. And you saw the Rams. So all of this started to come out because this was the most compelling stuff from the whole scene. And there was reports before the draft that the Rams tried to trade up to the top 10. But what this show showed you was they actually showed you the negotiations, and they actually showed them who they were going after, which players they were going after. And it started, they were trying to trade into like the early parts of the teens to try to get Brock Bowers. And like they showed the negotiation with the Jets where they tried twice to trade up, even when they traded down. And McVay called like Kevin O'Connell while they were on the clock trying to get him to trade, but he's like, there's no way. Then once Bowers went, they tried to trade, and they didn't hide it. They tried to trade for Byron Murphy. So they made multiple attempts to get up, and they said in the thing they want to get ahead of 16 because they knew Seattle would take him. So the best part was McVay was getting visibly upset as this was going on because first he loses Bowers, and then as each pick comes along, he was getting visibly upset. And like the quotes in the story and like the quotes from the scene, like the Rams blogger did a really good job of just like cutting out those quotes. And like team by team, McVay is getting more upset, and he starts getting testy with the GM when he's asking him a question. And when they couldn't get to 15, which was like their last chance, like he got pissed. And it was interesting. They wanted Murphy, and then so like the quotes that came out from those stories and from this video are actually incredible.
They are, and I want to remind people who the Rams were so desperate to get by showing this video. I don't know if you've even seen this, Jeff. This is from last night, throwing out the first pitch at the Mariners game is our very own Byron Murphy. Watch this. There he is. Look at those calves, by the way.
Holy
I mean, that guy is just like
Evan's done all that stuff on like Thick Boys. We got to get Evan like breaking down.
He's
Murphy's.
a unit.
Yeah.
But I think Sean McVay might change his mind if he saw. Look at this pitch.
Ooh. Not a finesse player.
I mean, when you got that much muscle, Jeff, then it's a little hard to really get that shoulder mobility that you need to be a thrower of the baseball. But no, I mean, here's a couple of the quotes, and then I'll play the sound of what you were just talking about in a second. But this is just a snippet. It says McVay was particularly aggressive in wanting to land the Texas defender. McVay, quote, we'll be reasonable, but try and go up and get Murphy. I would try to get this guy. He makes a huge difference to me. I just don't think he'll get past 16, the Seahawks pick. I'm not saying be reckless, but he's way better than anyone. And Snead says, don't worry about it. You know, being reckless ain't in the DNA. McVay says, but aggressively smart is. He's like, come on, dude, go get this guy. And I don't know, man. I love that. So then let me play this sound of McVay. Let's see if I can find it. I've got this here. Here we go. Let me get this queued up and I will play the sound for you. I'm just going to play the sound and not share the video of this one. So I do have to put this on screen for a second and then we'll go back and get us back to our normal. Okay, here we go. So hopefully you guys can hear this. I've got the sound turned up as far as it'll go. This is Sean McVay talking to Les Snead. And he's just there's nothing huge in this sound, but if you listen to the tone of Sean McVay's voice about who's up on the clock, listen to this.
So is Cincy on the clock?
Yes. It's right in front of you.
I don't know if you could hear that. So that was Les Snead say, is Cincy on the clock? And Sean McVay says, yes, it's right in front of you. And he is just right now, he's steaming, dude.
He was short of him.
He's not happy, man. And so, I don't know, Jeff. Personally, any chance we can to kind of enjoy a little schadenfreude with our NFC West brethren. You know, the Cardinals, not as much. They're one of the worst franchises in history. Like, all they have is bad. But I don't know. Like Sean McVay, the Rams, I'll take it. What was your reaction?
Yeah, there's a lot there. There's a lot to take away. Like we had heard the Bowers stuff, but I think when we were talking, I think the thing that gave us the most fear, I think in this draft, was the Rams ending up with Byron Murphy. I think you said it the night of your show on the draft. I said the one pick that would have irked you, and which bothered us about all those trade down scenarios, was the fact that they were going to lose Aaron Donald and they could have just plopped this guy in there. And now we do all these evaluations and you hear McVay the way he viewed this guy, and you can see from the quotes, and you'd have to go deeper. And a lot of people didn't circulate the video, but you can see from the video of those quotes, you can see how bad he wanted this guy. The quotes are pretty telling. Like, this guy is better than anyone else. Like, this guy. And they had him looked at differently. And I know it's funny, it's like looking back at the draft, like there are a bunch of people that knocked the Seahawks for not taking Johnny Newton there. I remember like Doug Farrar like gave them a bad grade because they didn't take Johnny Newton over Murphy. Like, that's not how you grade a draft. Anyway, that's a side point. But like McVay, who's like one of the better Italian evaluators, one of the guys who's been really sharp identifying players at certain spots, the fact that this guy in such high regard and he viewed him very differently than that other crop, including the guy he took. I remember when they drafted Jared Verse, someone tweeted out, I can't remember who it was. It's like, McVay looked pretty pissed off. And at the time, I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, I didn't see that. And then when you see this video, all of a sudden, it kind of makes sense. And as like the video and the story goes, like Verse was like the bottom of their tier, but he was the guy they kind of settled on. And after that, they would have traded out. But like, if you think about all the players we talked about and the way me and you talked about Murphy one kind of versus the next guy, and then we felt there was a gap. And it's interesting to see Sean McVay, literally one of the best talent evaluators in the NFL, have the exact same grading. And for me, like a thing that clicked in my mind, like Latu was a guy that Indianapolis ended up taking, and a guy that was tied to the Rams. And me and you were kind of icky on him. And it wasn't just the medical. A lot of people had tied the Rams to Latu. And a lot of like the smarter Twitter draft analysts, and not no shot at them, but they had Latu similar grade to this. And me and you, if you remember, if you go back and watch our draft coverage, we thought he was a totally different tier than these guys. Pretty cool to see the Rams thought the same thing.
Yeah, I mean, besides the just enjoying the pain of Sean McVay, who basically has just had everything he's wanted for a while. I thought it was interesting that they were that high on Bowers. And you can imagine Sean McVay with a guy like Bowers. If you put Bowers with Nakua, Kupp aging out a little bit. He's 31. I can't believe Cooper Kupp's that old. It feels like he just got into the NFL. But and they still got, I think, quarterback questions on that team beyond this year, and who knows, maybe even this year. But I think that they already have a young, talented defense, and then they would have had, some real weapons with Kyron Williams, Bowers, and Nakua. So, I mean, makes sense that they would want to really go aggressively after Bowers. It's also fascinating that none of the teams, we were talking about all these trades that were going to happen. People are going to trade back, trade down, and they were offering 19 and 52. Like, that's a good second round, like, to move up not that many spots. And I mean, the Seahawks, remember, we were talking, to give you some idea, the Seahawks, we were talking about 16, them moving down to 20, not even necessarily getting a second round pick for their trouble to move down 4 spots. And the Rams were offering a second round pick to move up, 4 spots, 5 spots, whatever it was. So they really, really wanted Bowers, and then they really wanted Murphy. And the way Cameron DeSilva, who was kind of tweeting about this, said, he said, "I'm not saying the Rams weren't excited about Jared Verse, but they were clearly, emphasis, asterisks on either side, very disappointed about missing out on Bowers and Murphy." And look, we've been there, Jeff. Like, there are guys where you're like, yeah, I'm fine with us drafting those guys, but the guys we really wanted were these guys. And it seems like in a lot of cases, when you have that much conviction about players and you don't get them, those guys end up being pretty darn good.
Yeah, and we saw another story come out this week where the Seahawks and Schneider were talking about the mistake he made with George Kittle. And just
yeah,
that was a whole crazy story, the fact that he said that on record. But it's so true what he said. The fact that McVay was this, like, for lack of a better term, butthurt over losing that guy, and to feel that close. And yeah, I remember Ben Baldwin, the noted analytics Twitter guy. He was very critical of the Seahawks for after the draft coming out and saying they had 4 trade offers and didn't take one. And he thinks anytime you have a chance to trade in a non-quarterback scenario, you have to trade. And I didn't agree with it. I think context in each draft, like if you look at who went 16 this year versus last year, like the kind of quality of talent that was there, I don't think you can have a steadfast opinion. So I'm not here. But look at the other side of this. The Rams, who I don't know what he thinks. I think he's been critical of the way they build their teams. The Rams offered multiple trades where they were going to give up 19 and their second this year. And the other ones, like the lower trades, were 19 and their third. So for a team that we're crapping on for, like, well, they didn't take a trade back, this is why. And this is what we're trying to explain. And we're not saying the Rams approach is right. There's a lot of reason that their approach might have been wrong. But what I was trying to explain, and what I thought Ben would miss the point on, was there was a quality of player when the Seahawks drafted that was at a totally different caliber relative to who else was out there, and relative that's usually there at 16. And the thing I was thinking about watching this, we were so upset when the Seahawks won that game against Arizona at the end of the year, because we thought it would screw up their draft position. Thinking now, like, say the Seahawks had the 7th pick. Do you think they take Murphy there?
The 7th pick.
Or the 9th pick? Like,
I mean, so let's go back through who went there. 2024 draft. Why did that not work? There we go. All right. So who did go there?
Or even the 8th pick or the 9th pick. Like,
Right. So the Penix goes at 8. Odunze. So if they had had the chance to draft, I think the question is whether they would have potentially drafted a quarterback there. I
Yeah.
don't think so,
I don't either.
but maybe they wouldn't have made the Howell pick or the trade, and maybe they. I mean, this is an awful road you're taking me down, Jeff. But I could
I'm just
absolutely
opening
see
up
them.
like.
I could see them taking a JJ McCarthy or something.
Okay, so let's say 12.
Yeah.
Like, I think they would have taken if they had 8th pick and took Murphy. Like, no one
I
would have
think you're
batted an
right.
eye.
I think at 12 they still take Murphy.
Yeah.
And
So
yeah, go ahead.
well, that's my point. Ultimately, they got a guy they probably would have been taken anywhere between 8 and 12. That they got at 16, and we spent so much time like, oh, the drop from 14 to 16, it's going to kill them.
I definitely felt that way, or at least I wasn't happy because it also meant the Cardinals moved up and got Marvin Harrison.
Yeah, I was beside myself about the whole thing, but that's where I'm just going back to my point about like everyone's like, well, they should have traded down. They had caliber players that I think they would have been comfortably taken. Back to my point, I'm not trying to take you down a wormhole, but
I don't mind a wormhole now and then.
But that's what I'm saying. Like the Rams thought enough of that guy, and they were crushed. And I think you said it, but you talked about it on your Mike McDonald show. It kind of comes back to this thing. They were one domino away from a completely different path. If the Rams completed that trade with the Colts, this draft would have looked a lot different.
Well, speaking of butterfly effect, I'm gonna out myself and Evan Hill here. That I fed him some content. It occurred to me yesterday something that didn't make me happy, but I knew it would make Evan very happy, which is if Jason Myers had not missed that field goal in LA to win the game, then the Rams and the Seahawks would have flopped. I forgot the Rams only had one more win than the Seahawks. Like that, they seemed like a meaningfully better team than the Seahawks last year, especially the way Stafford played. And anyway, so they would have flopped, and the Rams would have gotten either Byron Murphy, or they would have been in a position to really actually do trade up for Brock Bowers at that point. So I was like, oh my God, this is the perfect Evan content. It is pro Jason Myers explaining why he missed something that actually helped the Seahawks and led the Seahawks to getting Byron Murphy. So I know that Evan was very excited to tweet that out yesterday, and I'm glad he had some fun with it. But yeah, I mean, it really is this kind of multiverse of opportunities that you're like, wow, this could have been. Are you watching that show Dark Matter on Apple TV at all?
No, but I heard I need to.
I think it's a heady show, but I think it's really well made, and it's pretty fascinating. Anyway, but like it's definitely in my head about living multiple lives and the just micro variations that could have happened to change things. But Jeff, like, look, I mean, it's not just the Murphy thing. The more space I get between when this draft happened and the fact that it happened, and now, the more I'm just really comfortable, happy, excited with the way the first 2 days fell for the Seattle. I mean, I think Byron Murphy and Christian Haynes might be two of the, like, of all the different scenarios that could have happened in this draft, those two being their picks in the first and third round have to be in the top 1 to 5% of possibilities.
Especially seeing that story come out yesterday where the domino effect that led from the Penix shocking pick that essentially pushed Murphy down to Seattle was one. If Rome Odunze goes, John had talked about, the Bears were going to take him right there.
Yep.
So, like you said, that was like, I don't know if it's like a 95% outcome or 98%. And now we see the story that the Rams spent basically every slot from 11 to 15 trying to trade. So the odds of him only falling took a ton of different picks. And now we learned that people were trying to get him, and they're the team that's owned Seattle more than anyone over the last 5 to 7 years has been the Rams. So it's nice to get one back on them. We haven't had a lot of bright moments since Sean McVay got there, other than when someone missed a kick for the Rams, but not been a lot of other ones. But
No.
yeah, so yeah, you're right. And the Christian Haynes thing is like, had the draft gone a different way, they might have ended up with J.C. Latham, or they might have ended up with one of those cornerbacks. And the way Schneider talked after the draft, it seemed like the cornerbacks was that next group he liked.
Mm-hmm.
So, and then the fact that Christian Haynes slipped, like if you go to like some of our old mock draft madness shows and look where like Christian Haynes was going, like on a bunch of lists, he was like 32, 40. Yep. Like the odds of him getting to 81. And then, like, say they took Fautanu first round, even they weren't going to because he wasn't apparently in consideration. But what defensive tackle would have been there at 81? I don't think there was an impact defensive lineman anywhere close. And Murphy, there was really a big drop off in this draft. There weren't a lot of mid round. Like you saw how high Root Guerrero went. Like he was a project. And I'm pulling random things out of my head now. But
no, it's true.
The combination of like the top of the defensive tackle that had a clip spot, and then a guard that really wasn't supposed to hit in that spot. He was supposed to be gone 10 to 20 picks earlier. It's got to be like a 1 to 2% outcome.
It's pretty special. And I mean, the part of the other things they talk about in this article or this show with McVay and Les Snead was, I mean, they were okay with Jared Verse, but then Braden Fisk, to me, they traded a ransom to move up for Braden Fisk, who they clearly didn't see any like as being Byron Murphy level. I mean, I don't think anybody did. He's this crazy athlete, but he's undersized. And to me, there's a really decent chance that that's going to have been a bad move by them, that they overpaid to move up to get a athlete at the defensive tackle spot who's not, I think Braden Fisk could end up being a real liability against the run. I don't think he has the play strength that Byron Murphy does. And I think you can stick him in there and he's a movement guy, but it feels like they were still butthurt about what happened and wanted to come out with a defensive tackle. And I think they overspent to get one. And I think the one that they got is not the one. I mean, if they had gotten T'Vondre Sweat, which I'm not saying makes sense for their defense, but I'd be sitting here thinking, oh, they got a guy at least in the middle of that line. I'm not sure Braden Fisk is going to even be more than like Jordan Hill or like, like an athletic pass rusher that is not a guy that you really are excited to be a starter on your team.
Yeah. And anyone who's ever done a draft or a fantasy draft before knows what happens when you miss a guy at a scarce position. Anyone has been to that like emotional hell where you just do something stupid because you're chasing that one thing you missed. Anyone who's done a football draft or a baseball draft or has watched the NFL draft before, and we've seen the Seahawks do it. LJ Collier is the worst example we can think of, where they are dead set on that one position. All the guys go unexpected and they do something completely insane. And I've done it I have a level-headed guy. I've done it in basically any fantasy draft I've ever done. And that's where it kind of feels like they were with Braden Fisk, that they were so focused on getting that defensive tackle that they lost the best one maybe ever. But unfortunately, this was a scarce draft, and like Johnny Newton's the guy like the media loved. Like I didn't see Johnny Newton's name for them either, so I don't know if. So it became like Murphy, and if not Murphy, we got to get this guy, and that is a dangerous way to approach a draft, a dangerous way to approach any decision like that. And listen, any of the mistakes, the biggest mistakes you can see, happens in scenarios like that. And Braden Fisk was a really polarizing prospect. Some people loved him. He was an athletic dynamo at the combine. he's like a high effort guy, but like a lot of the film guys or guys who dig in, they didn't see a quality football player. They saw an athlete. And so going from Byron Murphy, who's just like a plug and play day one guy, to almost a project, to trade a future 2 for that kind of player. And they almost took him to the end of round 1. If you read the whole article, that was kind of like their worst case scenario. We'll move out of 19 and we'll take Fisk. Like, they got so dead set on that one guy. Again, I don't want to bring up LJ Collier anymore, but that's why that happened. They were so dead on taking a pass rusher. They all went, and they're like, oh, this is the top guy left on our list, ignoring that he's a 3rd-round prospect. Anyone's done that in a football pool. If you don't get a quarterback or you don't get a running back, they're all gone. Then you got to take someone's crappy one. And after the draft, you're like, why the hell did I do that? That's what this felt like to me.
It's true. I think it's really well said. And kind of piggybacking on this part of the conversation is, not only is Byron Murphy a guy that they wanted so badly, and that I obviously, I wanted so badly, and was graded highly by some, but not others. There was a lot of people, a lot of analysts that had Johnny Newton over Byron Murphy. A lot. I would say maybe not the majority, but it was pretty close to 50-50 at least. And so there's a lot of folks that kind of had questions. Johnny Newton now, second surgery on his other foot after recovering from surgery on his other. And then Byron Murphy is getting rocket fueled by the league right now. I mean, they are not including him on any list of defensive player of the year. They are showing him as a Asian man on Madden. Like, he's not even worth his own face. And I think this guy is going to absolutely unload all of this on the rest of the league. And this is a guy who, he came from not being the expected 5-star recruit. It took, when I was talking to his old high school coach down in DeSoto, he said, Jeff, that there was nobody that was offering Byron Murphy until the Utah coach came down. He saw him for 5 seconds and made him an offer. And then all of a sudden, people started getting interested. And that's where he ended up at Texas. But this guy has been a guy who's been overlooked, underestimated time and again. And I love it. I love the setup. And I love the fact that, if you heard, was it Mike McDonald yesterday with Tom Pelissaro talking about the fact that, like, he doesn't have to be the number one guy. He doesn't have, they've got a lot of dudes on that line. And so Murphy can come in, I think, to a better situation than Braden Fisk. Like, Braden Fisk is a guy that is going to probably have to start and get starter snaps. And I don't think he's ready to take on that load.
Yeah, it's a really good point. And again, anyone who wants to piss off Byron Murphy, like, please go ahead. Like, if you can get a chip on that guy's shoulder bigger than it already is, like, please. Like, if you want to, like, one of the last rankings that I think Josh sent us with, like, it was like a CBS graphic. They had Cole Bishop, who was like a 2nd or 3rd round pick, like a white safety, like, over Byron Murphy. Like, I don't understand. I don't know if the Seahawks are just like completely overlooked at this point, and they're back to like the Matt Hasselbeck era. I don't know what it is, but hey, if you guys want to piss them off, the best Seahawks that I can remember are the guys that had those crazy chips on their shoulders. So if you want to do that with him, create like a Richard Doug Baldwin kind of guy, I'm all in. But yeah, you bring up a good point. Like, God, he ended up in a good situation. Like, to have like the kind of depth he's walking into where he's not going to be asked to carry the load and can really just year one kind of figure out what he's good at, stick with that, and have Leonard Williams and then like Jaron Reed and the guy who no one talks about is Hankins just there. All these guys, like, you just walk, like, see some of the highlights of like the OTAs or the minicamps, just like watch that group walk around. They just look different. Like, they just have a different look to them, their size, their like swag. Like, the Seahawks haven't had a defensive line like that really in a long time, since like the April Bennett, maybe even the early years where it was Red Bryant and McVay kind of walking around. This is what they have. They have like the great veterans to kind of ease them into the league. It's another thing the Rams don't have. Like Jaron Reed, you really see value in him. Hankins, Leonard Williams, like these are pros. So these are great guys to learn from. And Mike Morris, who knows the defense, like it's a really good situation for him to walk into. So, man, it's so fortunate that what they've done with that defensive line group relative to where it was trending in the past years. And yeah, you look at the Rams, it's sort of like something like the offensive line with Seattle, where it's an all young guy kind of group, and they have players there. Don't get me wrong, but it's not projecting nearly like this group is.
Did you hear Byron Murphy, his interview when they asked him about like who he's been hanging around with on the team, whether it's like the other rookies or defensive line group? You heard that?
I did it. You know what? I've been giving Wyman and Bob a hard time for a while. This was their first time in a while. I thought they did like a legitimately good interview. And they actually got him to talk. I don't know if it's because Dave played football, but yeah, anyway, I did hear that. And Jaron Reed, another guy.
Jaron Reed.
He's like, Jaron Reed's taking me under his wing. He's taking me around. He's showing me where to go in the city. He's taking me around the building. And again, I've been one of those people. After the draft, I thought, oh, maybe they'll cut Jaron Reed, like $5 million off the cap. This was before the Draymond Jones thing, obviously. But, God, I don't think a lot of us realize his impact in the building. And I know he's had some off the field issues, and that was earlier in his career. But like people talk about what kind of leader he is and how people just follow him around. And the fact that he's taken this rookie and like Jaron Reed's like in the last year of his deal, who knows will he be around? I think that's really interesting stuff. And again, it lines up to exactly what Mike Morris was talking about in the interview you shared last week. So, man, I did not personally realize the kind of impact Jaron Reed had as a leader in that room, but really telling. I had the same reactions. Like, wow, like didn't see that one coming.
It's cool. It's cool. It's cool for so many reasons. You touched on some. It's cool that Jaron Reed has that kind of presence in that room and that respect. But it's also cool, Jeff, that Byron Murphy is a humble enough first-round pick to come in and actually seek it out and soak it up. And there are plenty of guys that come in and just already assume that they're the best and don't want to hear anything from anybody. They're just going to show you. And why are you like, why are you trying to tell me I'm Byron Murphy? Like he could have had a completely different attitude, but he's come in with this perfect mentality of hates everybody on the outside. Maybe not hates, but has got a chip on his shoulder about everyone dismissing him on the outside, and absolute humility and eagerness to be coached. Everyone has talked about him being a professional, coachable, and then you hear that he has been following around Jaron Reed and listening to him. Everybody says Jaron Reed holds to a certain standard. Like, there's so many good things here set up for Byron Murphy to be the best possible version of himself. And when I've been looking at, I mean, like I said, I looked at all Boye Maffe's sacks. I did that yesterday. That'll be up for people to, it's up for YouTube suite level members now, so they can check that out if they want, but it's gonna be up for everybody else a week from Tuesday. And I'm sitting there watching, once Leonard Williams got there, all of a sudden Boye Maffe's sacks kind of went from him having to either, a blocking mishap where no one blocks him at all, or maybe he beats the outside shoulder of the tackle just on a speed rush, to him having these stunts where he is looping around Leonard Williams, and Leonard Williams is causing two offensive linemen to run into each other, and Boye Mafe is getting a free run at the quarterback. In fact, he did that to Sam Howell in one of his sacks. And then I see Draymond Jones on the other side in the game that Boye Mafe had. His only 2-sack game of the season came against the Titans. And Draymond Jones at that time is on the opposite side. And as much as I like Draymond Jones as a base down edge, I don't like him as a nickel edge, like as pure pass rush situations. And so he's so much slower and less twitchy as a third down kind of edge player. And so Maffei's dealing with a lot. On one of his sacks against the Titans, he beat 3 blocks to get the sack. And now you plug into that and you're like, well, now you don't just have Leonard Williams. You got Byron Murphy. And you don't just have Leonard Williams and Byron Murphy, but you also have Jaron Reed not playing nose tackle all the time. He can play defensive end, which is his real position. And you add in there Uchenna Nwosu on the opposite side. And you add in, all these other aspects to the way this could come together. And it's like, I think this is legitimately interesting. And then you flip to the other side of the ball, Jeff, and I had Duke Manyweather on. I know you know Duke and follow him online, and him talking about Olu Oluwatimi. And I had Ray Roberts on Monday and him talking about Olu Oluwatimi. And I've been neutral on him. Like, I've been hesitant. I'm not negative on him, but I've been neutral on him. I'm starting, like, the things I'm hearing about what he did this offseason and his approach and what they believe is possible for him. I mean, let's dream for a second, brother. Let's think about a plus center, like a actual above average center in the middle of this line. It's been a while. It's been a
Yes,
young center. So I get excited about the inside of this team, the trenches of this team, with Christian Haynes, with these moves. I even, I'm not hating the Laken Tomlinson thing. I don't think he's a world beater, but I love everything I've heard from him. I love the presence he's going to provide in what's been a kind of veteranless room. So yeah, I don't know, man. It's June. We're allowed to be excited, but I kind of just like the trend of where things are going.
Yeah, and hearing, and this is where the coaching staff and the building of the team and just feels different. And just you heard Duke, and well, if you didn't hear it, for people who didn't listen, but the hear way Duke and Ray Roberts talk about Scott Huff just feels different than how some of the other offensive line coaches have been talked about. And that impact on Charles Cross and on Olu, and Olu really seems to have a self-awareness of what he needs to get better at, which is really promising as a young player. A lot of people don't have that kind of headstrong perspective. And hearing both those guys who are renowned offensive line experts, and they don't typically, especially Duke and Ray, they don't typically blow smoke, and they're not just going to be like, this guy looks great. They'll be straight up with you. If you follow Duke on Twitter, yeah, I'll do it with his players, but the way he talked about Charles Cross versus how he'll talk about Lane Johnson, it would sound remarkably different. But yeah, there's all of a sudden, I thought it was really cool. I think you cited this yesterday, is when Mike McDonald was talking about Christian Haynes. And he's like, when the pads come on, that's when we're going to really feel this guy. And I've been kind of wondering, why isn't he playing more? And then it kind of clicked. It was in 7-on-7, 11-on-11, he isn't the kind of player that might not flash. But when you can start to hit people, and they're building a team the way we've wanted to ultimately, and there are impacts on this, the running game. Zach Charbonnet is a guy I mentioned on Wednesday. I think he'll really impact if this makes a difference. And just for a team that's we're not sure where they are, they're kind of in that middle class, they have an unusual amount of young players that are growing and that are fun. The worst place to be is kind of where Atlanta is, where you have some of those guys, but you're built around these older players. And sort of the end of the Tim Ruskell teams were kind of like that, because you're 1 year away from just falling off a cliff. This team has an unusual amount because of the Denver trade, really, and how well they drafted otherwise. But you mentioned the offensive line. You mentioned we've gone through this time and time again, the cornerbacks, but they just have an unusual amount of young talent. And that's where at a time like this, it is easy to dream big, and it is easy to get excited, because those are the teams that can kind of really take a big jump when those guys kind of hit together, and if they can be unlocked. And again, the worst kind of teams are the teams that are built on these mid-level veteran signings that you're hoping to hang on. If you had a whole team of Jaron Reeds, he'd be oh, we're in trouble. We might look okay on paper, but those are not the ascending players. So yeah, your call-outs are really good, and it's there's a lot there that you can kind of believe in, other than the linebacker spot, which we'll save that for another day. But there's a lot of things going in the right direction, and that's why I think there is a lot of excitement around the fan base right now.
Yeah, I mean, I think maybe as we kind of wrap up last 15, 20 minutes, whatever it is, I'm curious now that we've been through OTAs, we've been through OTAs, we've been through the mini camp, the mandatory mini camp, and we're heard from different people. We've listened to who's doing what. What are your kind of takeaways? What do you feel like? What do you feel maybe differently now than you did 2 months ago about the Seahawks?
That's a good question. I think I didn't realize the impact of Jarran Reed. I think that would be my number one takeaway.
Mm-hmm.
The thing I feel the most is just how quickly McDonald and Witherspoon are meshing. Like, we've thought, like, since he got hired, like, this is the guy that could really take off. And it seems like within a short period of time, since the players have been allowed back in the building, that these two are just meshing in a way that, and I think that was one of the reasons they ultimately drafted Witherspoon. I think when they got Witherspoon on that visit, Pete was probably blown away by his football IQ. And I think that kind of threw him up the board, that I don't know if they would have taken him if they didn't have him on a 30 visit. And I think McDonald and him have had that same kind of just jump off the page relationship. I would say the other one, it's interesting that when McDonald keeps doing these interviews, he keeps making sure to mention Noah Fant when he talks about all the skill players. And Noah Fant's kind of been a guy, been an afterthought to me, even though they kind of paid him. But every time he talks about, okay, here are the guys we're going to emphasize in our offense, he'll mention the 3 receivers, and then he throws in Noah always at the end of these things. So I think they might use the tight end a little bit differently than they have been, as more of like they have their 2 blocking guys, Farrell Brown and Barner, and then they can actually let this guy kind of move around. And Pete and whatever offenses they ran, they never were able to figure out how to use tight ends in the passing game. So that's another one that's crossed my mind. And I'd say probably how much Laken Tomlinson has taken over the room already.
Mm-hmm.
He was a guy like I haven't been high on, I'll be honest. Like, even when you asked me when we did that show a couple weeks ago, like offensive line this year, but hearing him talk and hearing he's on that like leadership committee and hearing Mike talk about him, he's someone that was kind of like a guy I thought might get cut or he might get beat out by like Lamea. I think I underestimated his impact in the room.
Yeah, I think those are all great storylines. Some of the things that stand out to me are Devin Witherspoon is just, this is becoming his team, or it's in his image, and I think that only happens not just because of the credibility he has and the personality he has, and Mike McDonald, meshing with him, like you said. But if Quandre Diggs and Jamal Adams were still here, Bobby Wagner were still here, I don't know that there would be that void that he could step into and be as much a centerpiece of how they're building this thing. And I think that's a good thing, man. Like, you have to have these voids sometimes for someone to step into. And it's not because Devin Witherspoon was a shrinking violet, but there's just a respect. There's what's the word? Basically, I'll just leave it at respect. But
no, but and it's not the first time. It's not the first time we've done this. Like, I remember when they cut Lofa Tatupu earlier in the Pete era. Everyone was like, "Who are the leaders going to be on the team? Like, how could they have this?" At the time, I was younger. I was nervous about that. I'm not going to lie, and it let guys flourish that maybe wouldn't have. And that's where kind of Red Bryant and Mebane kind of took over the team, and other guys kind of took over the team. And I think that's a great call out by you. I don't think I'd factor that in. It's like the impact of Diggs and Bobby in the room and what it does, and kind of what it does for that next generation.
Yeah, the word I was looking for is deferential. So,
yeah.
I think that's one piece. I think another thing was honestly just seeing Mike McDonald in his environment, and I feel like I've learned a bit about Mike McDonald. I'll probably do a show just about that at some point, but as much as I was excited for him to be the coach, like that was the guy I wanted, I would give him like a C minus on his first few press conferences, and the power dynamic I was seeing with him and John Schneider was giving me pause, and I thought a little bit of deer in headlights for a first-time head coach, instead of just the absolute confidence. Since they got on the field, it's like a complete flip. I see a guy that seems it's not just that he's happier, but you see him the way he's answering questions. He's he knows exactly what he thinks. He knows exactly what he wants. He is executing on the plan. I think, Jeff, he is a guy that part of it, and part of probably what we were seeing earlier on, is he's a guy that probably only feels comfortable when he's got a plan. He is a planner, and he's a detail guy. And I think he didn't know how he was going to run camps. He had never done that. He didn't know how his staff was going to come together and how they were going to do all these things. He didn't know a bunch of things. And now you hear him talking about like, oh, we already know what we're doing for training camp. We already know, like he's got a plan. And so now you see him being able to like just exhale a little bit and focus on the football stuff. And he seems like a teacher, dude. He seems like a teacher. He seems like he built a staff full of teachers. And we haven't even started really talking about Kennedy Palomalu. We haven't talked as much about, Leslie Frazier is getting more conversation now, but you kind of can go on through the list of coaches that they've assembled. I don't know, man. I think that this is a really good room full of coaches. And I think that when people talk about offseason moves, I doubt that there's any team in the NFL that has as much of an influx of coaching knowledge and talent across the board. Maybe the Chargers, but I really like what they've got going on. So that's another thing for me that stood out.
That's you really nailed that last one, because I felt the same way as McDonald. He just seemed like someone who wasn't comfortable. And I think I mentioned a couple weeks ago when the OTAs started, once the football aspect started, it was like a new person came out. And the word I used at the time was just how comfortable in his skin he felt.
Mm-hmm.
And as he keeps going on, he's doing these national interviews now, like with Schefter, and he did the ones with the insiders on the NFL Network. And sounds like a completely different person. If you listen to like John Harbaugh speak and how comfortable he is and how like energetic he is, he's sounding a lot more like him, where at the beginning he sounded more like someone who was just kind of giving you by the book, not like sound like kind of like a corporate stiff at first a little bit. But he's really, I've had the same read as you. Like hearing him the other day, it was like talking about training camp, and it was like a completely different person. He's so much more confident, and it seems like he's really taking command. And you're right. And I've said this before, like nothing impacts the team. And like we talk about like models or projections, the thing that can't be projected is the impact of coaching. And like when the Rams, for example, we were owning on them for a bit, and I'm happy that, but like when they went from Jeff Fisher to McVay, they got some better talent, but they had an almost like light switch of a team, like how organized they were, how detailed they were. And you saw like with the Colts last year, like Shane Steichen comes in and they had all these injuries, and the detail and how like they lost Anthony Richardson. They didn't fall off a cliff at all. Like they made the playoffs. And I would love to give John Schneider truth serum of what he's seen in the last couple of years, what he's seeing now in terms of detail and teaching and assistance and the kind of quality of coaches they've got in the building. Like it honestly seems night and day.
Yeah, I feel the same way. And I mean, a couple other storylines that kind of feel different to me, or like I feel differently about than I did maybe a couple months ago. Draymond Jones has got to be up there.
Oh yeah.
I've been pretty clear. The very first episode I did of Hawk Blogger Mornings, which is like 85 days ago or whatever it is, I did look at defensive line. I looked at Mike McDonald's defensive line history, the body types that he employed, and neither, like, he didn't have anybody that looked like Draymond Jones. He did not have anybody in the 280 to 295 range. Like nobody at outside linebacker, nobody at defensive line, just didn't exist. And so I'm like, I think Draymond Jones is a man without a land, without a place, without a home. And I'm guessing he's not going to be on this team next year. Well, fast forward 80 something days, Jeff, and Draymond Jones is a guy they've talked about a lot. They almost talk about him in a way where they're excited that they've got a plan for him that they don't want to reveal. We see him playing. We hear from his trainer that he is training to be outside linebacker, and then he's working in position drills with the outside linebackers. He looks like he's probably dropped some weight, so he's probably closer in the 270s than the 280s. Could be getting into that Jadeveon Clowney role that we saw with the Ravens. And they have him also working inside with the tackles on nickel situations. So, and then they restructure his deal, creating cap space that I think pretty clearly increases the odds he will be on the team next year as well. That's a guy that it's almost 180 degrees from what I thought, a couple months ago to where we are now.
Yeah, his contract was set up so clearly that to move on. And I said we did that show, I think it was last Saturday, where we looked at 2025 players that might not be back. And he was like circled on both of our lists. And you can usually tell a lot by contracts. They usually tell you a story. And you can usually tell like almost a year out. All right, who are they planning to move on from? Where are they going to get money from? Him being designated as the guy they chose to restructure, I think that's really telling. I think it's really telling. They made it harder to walk away from him, significantly harder, where all the void years would come due and things like that. And ever since that first personnel press conference where they sent out those scouts to go do the pre-draft press conference, and he was the first guy they mentioned. And so I bet there was a lot of uneasiness about how he was used last year. Lack of production relative to what they probably thought. He was not an impact player. He was fine. He wasn't a bad player, but he wasn't a good player. But I think there's a lot of excitement in the building about what they can do with him. And I was surprised by that. I thought he was a poor scheme fit that might be kind of be a one-year flyer guy, because he was really fit for that Fangio scheme. Like that's where he came from in Denver. So the returns look really good. The coaches were kind of raving about him, and he just got in the building. He wasn't there for the non-mandatory stuff. So, yeah, I'm with you. I would not have anticipated that in any scenario. I thought he might get cut in March.
We did have that conversation. We did. I didn't think that was going to happen, but there was a lot of people thinking that, and even after that, people thought that might happen. But I'll run through a couple other quick ones. We don't have to go in as much depth, but other storylines for me. I think Ryan Grubb came a little bit to the forefront, and we heard about the complexity of his offense. I think that's something I'm monitoring, because even Tyler Lockett recently with Rich Eisen, I played some of his sound. There's a lot of complexity. They're asking receivers to play more positions, to be more interchangeable, and I love that from a tactician strategic standpoint, but it does require more of players and require them to keep more in their heads and be able to do more well. And it then increases the odds of errors. So I am curious, offenses can be bad, not because of talent or even because of play call, but just because of poor execution. You have the wrong lineman run in the wrong direction, or the receiver run the wrong route, and that's enough to scuttle any play. So I am watching that. Generally, I'm excited about it, but I'm a little cautious on that front. I think that another storyline related to the offense and Grubb, I think the emphasis on the running back room is greater than I anticipated going into into the OTAs. Hearing George Fant talk about how special he thinks this running back room is, when kind of led towards talking about the receivers, and he just said, yeah, they're great, but the special part of this offense, the special room, is that running back room. And I am like, we don't even know what Kenny McIntosh has to offer. Forget like Zach Charbonnet sounds like he is in a much better place even than he was last year. Ken Walker, we know what he brings. I love the way we're seeing how much Scott Huff and the line is working on the blocking of the running backs, them being better pass protectors. So that's another piece that kind of stands out to me. Obviously, JSN is maybe the number one story of camp in terms of how much he's stepped forward, and the expectation that he's going to be, fulfill in his second year what I think a lot of us expected might start to happen in his first year. And so I think that's a big storyline. Yeah, I think those are the big ones. And then obviously the linebackers being out, both of them being out is a big one. And we're going to have to monitor that and see, I still am kind of waiting. Jamal Adams is the guy they have talked about multiple times. It wouldn't shock me if they brought him back. But yeah, I think those are probably the storylines that jump out. Anything I missed from your perspective, Jeff?
I think a story that's mostly come out of the Geno stuff. I don't know if we talked about that at all. It's been Mike, the way Mike, we'd been wondering what he meant by, he said the other day, like, Geno has to step up as a leader and we need him to take the next level. And we all kind of guessed what that was. And hearing him outright say it was really interesting. And he talked about how he kind of needs to be the one who's poised in all situations, and how he's kind of he needs to kind of take that step forward as like the calming voice of the team. And then the story I hear coming out of most of these camps is that he looks like a professional starting quarterback. He's in command. He just looks at a different level that Sam Howell does. And we've heard stories about interceptions from them. And it'll be interesting to see how Grubb could kind of see if he can make him a more consistent player. I know Rob was on your show talking about his historical trends where you see stretches of great play and stretches of slides. So I think that seeing him in command and hearing all the beat writers kind of say that, not coming from like the team, I think that was something I hadn't really thought about. I thought it might be closer between the two of those quarterbacks, to be honest.
Yeah, I think that's worth mentioning. It escapes my mind because I obviously I feel differently about Geno than a lot of people. So I never really, I would have been much more annoyed if that wasn't the case, but I'm glad that logic has prevailed. Fair. The other, I did remember a couple other quick stories. I think Abe Lucas's health is something we've been monitoring. Brady Henderson, I'm hoping that his information is accurate, that they do not believe that this is a chronic thing. That would, if true, and if he is back for camp and he can play this season, that is a massive story for this team. And then also the fact that McClendon Curtis has been getting number one reps at right guard. I'm not going to put too much into that with Anthony Bradford being, injured and, the pads aren't on yet. We'll see what it all plays out. But I think it was a little surprising to hear his name running with the ones at right guard from the beginning of camp, beginning of OTAs till the end of minicamp. So I think those are the things that probably primarily jumped out at me. And we'll do another show another time. We'll talk about what we're looking forward to in terms of training camp and the stories there. But yeah, man, that was, I think, a fun show. Talk about anytime we can talk about the tears of Sean McVay, we're gonna take that opportunity. And getting into some of the stories of not training camp, OTAs, and minicamp was good as well. Yeah. We should do this as much as we can. Saturdays with Jeff. I think people, everyone loves hearing from you. So whenever we can make this work, I think we should do it.
Yeah, anytime we have the chance to kind of step on the ramps, just give me a text and I'll be there. But yeah, man, I just can't wait for Byron Murphy to play those guys. I know Evan might have been crying yesterday seeing McVay that upset. I might have heard Evan too, but
That's
yeah,
true.
I hadn't heard anyone mention McClendon Curtis's. Yeah, and I hadn't heard anyone mention McClendon Curtis's name until Corbin Smith did. So, no, that's a deep cut. But yeah, no, anytime we want to talk Seahawks in the summer, you know me, I need to fill this space right now. It's a hole in my football schedule. So,
well, we will make that happen, my friend. Everybody, if you haven't already given the show a like and click subscribe, please do. Great way to show support for what we're doing and keep the community growing and keep the conversations popping. So please click like and subscribe. And if you haven't, join as a YouTube member. The link is in the description of the video. Join as a Patreon member. You get the audio version of this podcast on patreon.com/hawkblogger. Link is also in the description of the video, and you get access to the Slack channel where we talk about the Mariners as well. So you got that if you want to talk Mariners, and you get to ask us questions every week. So absolutely check out the YouTube membership and patreon.com/hawkblogger. Thank you to all of our members and supporters. Really, really, really appreciate it. Until next time, that was Jeff Simmons at Real Jeff Simmons on Twitter. I am Brian Nemhauser. You can find me at Hawk Blogger on Instagram and Twitter. This has been another episode of Hawk Blogger Mornings. Take care, everybody.